Blog Talk Radio.
Mysteries abound around the world, from strange lights of the night sky to ghostly apparitions passing from one realm to the next. From the great pyramids of Egypt to what lies beneath the depths of Loch Ness. From Bigfoot to Atlantis, they are all mysteries waiting to be solved. Join Laurie Phillips, Lauren Smith, Graz, and Billy Simmons as they search for the truth on Nite Callers Radio.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nite Callers Radio. Today is the 21st of September. We're almost into fall. Weather's been hot here, but we're all here, and it has been a crazy past 15 minutes. Apparently, the Starship Enterprise has completely changed their control panel from one week to the next. So the Merrick crew is trying to get everybody on board here, and I think we have everybody here. So let me make sure. I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call. Lauren, are you with us?
I'm here.
Graz, are you with us?
Well, here is relative. I'm not too sure. Billy?
Yeah, I'm here. I actually had to call in. It keeps booting me out, so.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Mama say stop is the devil. Man, tonight, I don't know. Jeez.
Finger crosses up.
Well, they won't let you call in until 15 till. That hardly leaves you time when they go and change everything up. You know, I just think it's nuts. It's nuts. But we're all here, thank God, and it's going to be a great show tonight. Although it started out kind of rough, I think it's going to be great. How's everybody doing?
Well, after the last 15 minutes, that's rather questionable.
Yeah. I think now we're all here. Our collective blood pressure's kind of going back down where it should be.
It's been the whole day trying to be calm and relaxed all day long, and in that 15 minutes before showtime, it's like it just wrecks it totally.
Yeah.
Blog talk.
Well, yeah, we're talking about you. I hope you're listening in. Blog talk.
If I knew some friends up on top, I'd be making phone calls about now.
Man, telling you. Well, anybody have any news before we go to our guest? I hate to just rush right into our guest. If somebody has any current events or anything interesting to talk about, anything.
I have nothing Bigfoot related.
Oh, do you have anything non-Bigfoot related?
Nothing anyone wants to hear about, I'm sure.
At least your laptop is still working.
It seems to be okay. My son knocked my laptop off the entertainment center about 3 times this weekend, so
and you didn't lock your keys in your car again.
Pretty worried for this show. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm busy writing my Dear Skype letter over here because this is the 3rd week in a row.
Dear Skype or Dear Blog Talk?
Yeah, our Blog Talk, I'm sorry. Skype too.
No wonder they haven't been getting it.
I think it was the 2 of them because they weren't ginning right tonight, so.
Yeah, they got that sign in via Skype button up there, and I'm damned afraid to click on it.
Yeah, that's what I was doing, so. Either way, we're all here, and it's going to be a great show. We made it, so.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we got a good
time. And our guest
tonight.
is here, too. He made it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, he is here.
Kenny is here.
So I guess if everybody's ready to go, I don't really have any news to tell, other than I'm ready for winter. I'm ready for fall. I went and got a new sleeping bag, and I got a new air mattress, and I'm going to get a new tent, and I'm going to be all ready to go camping on the Sabine in a few weeks. So I'm just ready for it to cool off. Yeah, I'm ready.
I know that.
Yes, I have. It's been over a year since almost a year since I've been camping. So I'm ready to go. I'm seriously ready to go.
So if Graz and I show up, you going to put us up?
Yeah, I'll put you up. It's a 6-man tent. Yeah. I don't know about the tent.
I'll just have to hitch a ride on that white 747. Keeps buzzing Billy's place up there. And...
Y'all might draw in too many Bigfoot.
That's true.
Run off my camping partner and scare him half to death if he knew that there's such things out there.
Well, ain't that the point?
Well, sounds like you need a new camping
partner. Yeah, that's my point
anyway.
of going.
Have to wake him up for something.
Oh, man. Tell you, I'm looking forward to it. I am. I'm ready. I probably won't even sleep the whole night before. I'm so excited about it finally getting to go, so.
Amen. I know Ricky's taking Adam fishing this weekend for the first time, and he's so excited about that, so.
Oh.
Yeah, he's pretty excited. I'm not going with him, and I said, well, good luck with that. Taking a 2-year-old fishing. Good luck with that. I worry. Yeah. Not everyone can be silly.
Yeah, well, is he going to take pictures? I hope.
Well, if he can. I don't know if he'll have any free hands, but should be interesting, at least. I'm going out for my birthday that night with a girl, so that should be fun.
Oh, that sounds great. I know you need it. A little time away from the fam and go out, let your hair down and be a girl.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, be a girl. Have girl time. Yep, every girl needs that.
Yep.
Okay. Well, how about anybody else? You got anything to add before we bring Kenny on?
I'm still unpacking in my apartment, so that's about the only news.
Oh gosh! And you're still sticking to that one box a day? Unpacking?
No, I actually got 4 of them done yesterday and a couple of them done today, so I'm doing them.
Oh, good. That's wonderful. I know.
I keep telling him how to get some help, but he won't listen to me, so.
Well, we won't go into details about that one.
That's true.
Yeah. It takes too long for the mail order thing. Yeah. That's too long. He'll be unpacked by then.
Moving on.
Okay. about it, Lauren. Will you go ahead and read the intro on Mr. Kenny, and we'll go ahead and bring Kenny on.
Okay. All right. So in continuing the series of the North American Sasquatch Researcher, we here at Nite Callers will be interviewing Kenny Jolhoske from the state of Maryland. Kenny is a native of Collage Park, Maryland, raised in Montgomery County, Maryland. At a young age, Kenny became fascinated with Bigfoot after reading Ivan Sanderson's book, Abominable Snowman, Legend Comes to Life. After graduating the University of Maryland in 1994 with a degree in anthropology, he began working in the field of Native American health care, creating culturally appropriate models of HIV/AIDS prevention for the urban Native Two-Spirit GLBT population. In 1996, Kenny joined the staff of the Biomedical Research Clinical Center Library at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, where he provided research data for clinical trials and other health-related research ongoing at the clinical center. His academic work in Native American studies deepened his interest in Sasquatch-related research. Kenny has researched extensively the relationship of Sasquatch as it relates to the religious and social ritual of the tribes in North America. He also has an ongoing interest in research into the possible social organization of the Sasquatch and the cultural attributes that may be displayed. Kenny enjoys music and studied classical piano for over 20 years, and he loves the study of the world of music. He's currently studying the Turkish language and culture, which I think is amazing. Join us for a very educational and interesting show with Kenny Joholske.
Welcome, Kenny. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Thank you. Doing good.
Well, for all of you out there that don't know, Kenny is a really good friend of all of ours, and we've spent a lot of time talking with him, and he's used to this crew here, and he knows what to expect from this crew here.
He puts up with it rather well.
Yes, he does.
If he doesn't by now, I don't know what to tell him.
Yeah, it's like I know you, Kenny, but I didn't know all of this about you. You've been quite mum about all your credentials here and everything like that. I was just very surprised that you were so well educated and well, not that came out really wrong, and I didn't mean it that way. I'm not surprised you're well educated. But I didn't realize that you were educated in the areas that you were educated. I thought your field was strictly medical, and I realize now that you've got anthropology.
Yes, that's how I started.
Wow.
It started. Well, I mean that in a major interest in the field, in the subject around Native American studies in particular, but then later Sasquatch research, and then applying, what I know and what I've studied to this whole area of research, and so it led me into the field eventually, and having my first sighting. I've had two sightings, but the major one was last fall in an area in central Maryland where I was doing research and had an encounter at about 75 yards away of a juvenile Sasquatch at dusk, going back to a campsite that I had been setting up, and so that was last fall in an area that I'm currently engaged in researching.
Okay. Do you mind going a little more in depth about your first sighting? Was that your first sighting?
Well, actually, I had a very long-distance sighting back in 1997 in the Adirondack Mountains while I was hiking in upstate New York. And maybe, I'd say 130 yards from me, was hiking a trail in an area of the Chautauqua National Forest, and saw a Sasquatch down a trail line I was hiking, and saw one at a very far distance move from the forest into and cross the path that I was walking down deeper into the forest. And it was a very quick, like 3-4 second sighting, but I knew it wasn't there, and it was bipedal. It was about 8 feet tall, and that was really my first kind of encounter, seeing it from a distance, and then really wanting to do more research because I knew Maryland had sightings, but when I began to really extensively study Maryland and in the area where I'm at, and doing some research in a national forest near me, I began to see and find structure, and then I've been doing research in this area now for going on 2 years. The current site that I'm doing research at, I've been involved in. It's been about 6 months of going out on a regular basis, making contact, and trying to elicit responses, and then look at some of, like we were talking about earlier, the cultural attributes of Sasquatch, which I'm very interested in. We'll talk about that later, but there's some points that I want to talk about in regards to that. But yeah, that was my very first sighting, and then the second one was last fall. I was squatching in an area of this. It's a protected watershed, so it's not exposed to development, and it's an old growth forest, and had been finding large structure in an area. I found 2 17-inch footprints in the swamp adjacent to this area. So I began to do extensive research and looked at the ecology, if it would support a large bipedal hominid form, and if so, what were I started looking at the ecology of the area to make sure that indeed, if something this large was here, could it support it? And in fact, after doing a lot of research in this area and going out in the field and looking at what is there food-wise, and then finding footprints. But to go forward a little bit with this, I had been with a friend who was going to go camping with me because I did not want to do a nighttime investigation in this area by myself.
That was wise of you, actually. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I had a friend with me, and basically we were camping on a ridgeline, a very high ridgeline, and I had a third friend help carry in equipment from the car, which was about a mile or so away, maybe almost 2 miles actually, and you have to go through this really humongous deep forested area to get to the ridgeline where we were camping. So after we had gathered all of our equipment and set it up, and my friend was setting up the tent and sort of arranging the camping area, my friend who was with me, I didn't want him walking back through the forest by himself because it was getting dusk. So I said, let me walk you back to your car. So I was walking him back to his car, had gone to the parking lot in this area, and then said, okay, I'll see you later. He was going to come back the next morning to pick us up. So as the sun was setting in this area, the coverage, the foliage is so thick, you don't really even see moonlight certain times of the year. So, here I am walking through this forest by myself with the sun setting and hearing, what sound to me like bipedal footfalls around me, almost like they're following me. So my adrenaline kicks in, of course, and I start walking faster. And as I hit the crest of the trail and am going up to the ridgeline, you have to actually go off trail and then up about a 75-degree angle up to the ridgeline. I hear what I thought was initially a deer, and I turned to look in the direction and saw a silver gray, 7.5 foot, approximately 7.5 foot, 8 foot Sasquatch bouncing up the ridgeline. And I turned, and as I turned to look at it, it had turned directly to see me, and it grimaced, like a smile but grimacing. And then within 10 seconds, it was gone. It was in the bush. And what the really creepy thing about this is I began to realize after the sighting, which is really kind of gave me sort of a shudder, was what I realized is when Mark, my friend, had gone up to put up the camping site, and I was walking my friend back to the car, is that they probably saw us and thought that he was solo camping or camping by himself, and then I was leaving the area. So when I come back through the area, they weren't expecting call, and the witch sign.
Hello?
Hello?
Kenny is losing his signal.
No, where'd he go? Oh, I think he dropped off.
Okay, he'll call back in. Oh, my gosh, right when it's getting to the good part. I thought it was my phone. It's typical.
I did, too. I thought it was mine as well.
Oh, there he is.
Wow. Okay, he's back with us.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
No problem, Kenny.
Okay.
Yes, we hear you great. Go ahead
anyway,
and continue.
So continuing with the story. So what I had realized afterwards is that the ridgeline they were bounding up would be able to oversee the camping site. So basically, the realization was that they were going to check out what was going on, and I had my sighting because they thought I was leaving the area, and that's the closest I've ever seen. And my subsequent work in the field, this area is divided by a river system, and there's two sides to the forest system that's separated by a river. And I was on the left side of the river doing my research a year ago. I'm now on the right side, and the reason why I'm now on the other side of the river doing research on the ridgeline is because what we began to realize is that they were actually coming from that area up to where we were camping. So this whole other side of the river is where I began to realize is where they were actually probably staying during the day, which is now where I'm actually researching. And I've had some really interesting encounters on that. And this is a very active area.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful.
So when people ask me, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Kenny. I can hold my questions until you're through.
Okay. So anyway, when people ask me, I always get this a lot, and when people ask me, I was very critical and very initially of the Sasquatch phenomenon, but when I got into the field and began actually experiencing it, not academically through research or through books, but actually in the field, it really changes your whole view system on this issue, because when you start having encounters and you start really looking at what's going on, and when you have the training and you start looking at what's going on, people go, oh, do you believe in this? But there's not an issue, but this is not an issue of belief, it's an issue of science. It's an issue of, experience and then producing evidence to show that you have these experiences. It's not about belief. This is not a belief issue. So go ahead. I'm sorry, you were going to ask me a question.
Yes, I was wanting to know, have you ever heard any vocals that you believe may be Sasquatch related in that area?
Yes, I have. Both. Let's put it this way. Last fall, we had vocals while camping at night, which were distinctly not of any known animal in that area. And I've been able to, through 2 years of research in this area, been able to identify at least 3 individuals. One, and the sighting of the juvenile male, and then having been in the forest where there's been communication, both calling and rock clacking and wood knocking, I've been able to discern that there's at least 3 individuals in this group. Now, last fall, when I was in this area and was in this area, this protected watershed also leads into basically a marsh and swampland. And I was there researching with a friend in the swamp, and we had been hiking, several miles, so we were very tired. And at one point, we stopped to take a break, and we were actually recording with a digital recorder in this area where we had heard some wood knocking. And so we were so tired, we decided to sit down on a log and just take a break and eat a sandwich or something. And so I get up to stretch my legs because I have diabetic neuropathy in my right leg. So I got up to stretch my legs, And I was walking towards this very large overturned tree with a large root system sticking out. And I walked about maybe not even 50 feet towards it, and I got the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard in my life. Unfortunately, because we were resting, we had turned the tape recorder off. So it was not caught on tape. Yeah, exactly. That was my...
That's Bigfoot luck. It happens all the time.
And I will tell you this, from my personal experience having heard this, I have never heard anything that would stop the blood in your body. And I looked at my friend who was still sitting down on the log, and we looked at each other, and we basically turned around and we we knew what that was, and it was the scream was so primal that it was just amazing. So we think that there might be other individuals in this group, possibly it could be a female, we're not sure. We didn't see this creature, we only heard it. But it was amazing. And I've subsequently gone and listened to, there are fox in the area, there are coyotes in the area, but this scream I heard sounded nothing like this particular vocalization I heard.
Wow. Goodness.
Wow.
And Grass, do you have any questions at this point in time? Or
not right now. No.
I think Grass has heard this story before. I think I've told this story before. Yeah.
See, that's what I love. I have not heard this story before.
Oh, okay, yeah. It was really my first encounter where I was like, we all have these, when you do research over the years, and some people have been doing this for 25, 30 years, you have these seminal experiences where, what I often describe to people is that, when you go out into the field, wherever you live in the United States and you're doing Bigfoot research, we all have these experiences. It's the one or two experiences where it definitively confirms for you that what you're hearing is not a known animal, and that it's what drives you more into the field, because you're like, okay, what was that? Every one of us that does research has had these experiences, whether it's a sighting, a vocalization, a close encounter, and it fuels the investigation, making you want to go out and learn more and experience more.
Okay, the question from the chat, Kenny, is this where you're discussing, is this in Maryland, the state of Maryland, or is it in New York?
Oh, I'm sorry. The one I had the last call was in Maryland. Yeah, it was in Maryland. My very first sighting was in upstate New York. Back many, 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 many years ago, back in, let's say it was 96, 97.
Let's say an undisclosed location in Maryland.
We'll just say an undisclosed location in Maryland.
Okay. I don't need to be reading the chat over there. Distract. You know how it is with me. It's like I can only do one thing at one time, and I can't do anything well. There we are. Okay. So Kenny, what was your initial reaction when you heard the blood-curdling scream? Did you feel like you were in danger, or that? What did you feel was the purpose of that scream? Do you feel as though it was related to you and your friend, or that it was totally unrelated?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say, when having heard that initial vocalization in the swamp area, I had felt like we had intruded too close. And I think that vocalization was it could have been a threat vocalization. I don't know what to read into it, but I knew as I got up from the log to move forward to stretch my legs, I may have gotten too close. I will have to say that subsequently, 2 weeks after I had this encounter, we found a small juvenile print in the same marsh area, and it was the track of a very small child's track. I photographed it with my phone, measured it, did not have any casting material with me, but it was no more than 6 to 7 inches long. So, and that was the only track of what to me looked like it was the footprint. Morphology was not that of a human child. It was very wide, very deep set into the ground, and I sort of stumbled across it while I was in this area. This is about maybe 2 weeks after we had heard that vocalization, so I was wondering if possibly this was a female with a young child, and we had gotten too close.
Or she had gotten too close.
Say that again?
Or she had gotten too close. I would say it's a 50-50 situation. I mean, they knew you were there.
Yeah, and maybe we just...
So she was doing this sneaking up on you, and she had gotten too close, and that was just kind of like just a basic warning.
Yeah.
That's too close.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, it stopped me in my tracks. So, it stopped me from moving any further. Had I been by myself, I probably would have. I don't know. I don't. It's funny because when you have these experiences, you think, oh, I'm gonna, you think the fight or flight reaction would kick in and you would run, but in fact sometimes it's almost so surreal that it's like you actually are more stunned and stopped in your tracks.
Exactly.
Than you are.
Exactly.
Oh, and then you're going to run away and run away from it because it was just so bizarre. The way it had happened.
I totally agree with you on that aspect of it, because sometimes it's especially like the very first time I had a sighting, or even every time I've had a sighting, I've never run. It's just like I am looking at it and cannot believe what I'm seeing, almost.
Yeah.
Even though I believe in them now. I totally believe in them. I believe that because I've seen them. And that's what it took for me to believe, was to see them, actually, with my very own eyes.
I mean,
but
I think
it's that whole, oh, my God, what am I looking at? This cannot truly exist.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think the most compelling aspect of this whole phenomenon with Bigfoot, Sasquatch, OMOP, from the Pacific Northwest coast through Maine down into Florida, is that when you have a sighting, and I can't remember what researcher sort of articulated this experience once. I was listening to a researcher describe their first encounter with a Bigfoot. You have a realization that when you enter the forest, most people who enter forest systems think, there's nature here, there's birds, there's foxes, coyotes, there's beavers, there's squirrel, what have you. There's nature. But we don't think that there is another intelligent bipedal hominid form that's there. And the realization when you have these experiences and you have these encounters is that there is another intelligent species possibly related to us or similar to us that has existed alongside modern humans for thousands of years, not just in North America, but in Russia, China, Central Europe. And that, how is that possible? How is it possible that a 7 to 8 foot bipedal hominid form could live alongside modern humans undetected for so long? And this is what led me to the deeper question about Bigfoot. And this is where I kind of get some heat. But my whole crux of a lot of this is I believe, as a researcher, that we need to figure this out. Not just what is Sasquatch, but how do they move through their world? What is their worldview? How do they exist in such a way that they can stay hidden from modern human populations in a wilderness system? I'm not talking about anything paranormal. I'm talking about levels of social organization, complex enough.
You had me nervous for a minute there. I was kind of nervous where you were going with this, but thank you for that.
No. What I'm trying to say, this is really kind of the crux of what I'm interested in. Is how does the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, have a social organization as a species so complex that they are able to hide from modern humans and live yet alongside them in areas where most national forests buttress large urban areas, and yet maintain a ecology to be self-sustaining. I mean, these are big ecological issues that really aren't, in my opinion, being looked at. I mean, it's just, there, and this is where I get heat, and I take the heat, but I believe that this complex level of social organization implies a cultural complex. Now, I have found things in my area. To me, I've experienced things in the field that indicate that they have a nonverbal form of communication. The wood knock and the rock clanking are simply a set of nonverbal communication, allowing them to communicate with one another. But then there's the whole issue of structure and what is being found in the forest systems that are obviously not made by humans and they're not naturally occurring. And these are tree arcs, these are possible nests, these are a variety of what look like structure forms created by an intelligent creature. And when you start putting together the larger historical framework with Bigfoot and in modern human society, you have to ask yourself, how, in order to sustain this level of obfuscation, of hiding, of culture of obfuscation, of hiding, that there has to be a complex of culture to sustain this. It's just not, I don't want to use the gorillas and the myths. This is where I come into conflict with the whole Gigantopithecine theory, because, I could sit here and go on a lot about this issue with Gigantopithecus, but in order for this to continue on as it has, I don't think we're dealing with an undiscovered form of anthropoid. I don't think we are.
Okay.
I think we're dealing with a form or a species of hominid that has a cultural attribute to it, not just humans, but another form of hominid. Now, what that form of hominid is, I don't know. And I become more complex by this issue the more field research I do. Because I'm in the field not just looking for footprints or hair samples, I'm looking at the whole totality of what's going on when I encounter these creatures.
Yes.
Not that there's any anthropological background that you share with the rest of us here. I mean, we've had discussions like this for hours.
Yeah.
What the heck are they? Are they some form of Neanderthal, or with any of those other names that people pop off all the time? I've pretty much given up on any of those answers. They are a different type unto their own that has existed alongside all the ones that scientists accept.
Or they could be a species or from that we have not yet found in the fossil record that continues to exist. That's another possibility as well.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I would like to see in Bigfoot research in the future is that there be more cooperation among scientists in different disciplines of the human sciences and primatology, to where we can actually look at the cultural attributes attributed to Bigfoot and see how they line up across the United States and Canada, and then analyze them and start looking for patterns. It's not, to me, Bigfoot isn't just about the sighting. People go, when you watch television shows or read books, it seems like the sightings are all very random. In other words, that people are in the forest camping, hiking, picnicking, and then all of a sudden they have a Bigfoot encounter. And the way the setups of most of the stories you hear of people is that that's the case, and then for some people it is, but there are, how many, when we start looking at encounters of Bigfoot with indigenous societies, with native societies, they speak of continued encounters and even possible trading and long-term encounters with these creatures over long periods of time, enough to where they have they become a part of their worldview system, their culture. And, so when you look at, the indigenous perspective on these creatures and how they relate to modern humans and indigenous societies, then you start seeing a larger complex of encounters and long-term encounters with these creatures that would indicate a more complex level of social organization among the Sasquatch or Bigfoot that is more than just what primates would be able to do. I mean, even though higher primates are extremely intelligent, and they do exhibit culture, primates do have a culture, chimpanzees do, mountain gorillas do, but I'm talking a level of complex that would have a continued relationship with modern human societies, as we see with the Sasquatch or Bigfoot in both either tribal societies or in European descendants who live in rural areas. I mean, there seems to be much more to this question than is, I think, being looked at.
I think that has changed a little bit since the native versions of it, since the Industrial Revolution and all these millions and millions and millions of people coming to America. I think they've had to adjust. And a lot of their own cultural systems have, some of them might even have crashed, and they've had to reestablish something new.
Yeah.
They have also gotten to a point possibly that they're more afraid of humans than they have been in the past. They might have interacted with the natives a lot more than anything that we could imagine now.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And the thing is, too, you wonder how, all cultures adapt and all cultures change over time. They're not, cultures are organic, they are not static. And that would also go for the Sasquatch as well. How have they had to adapt? But this is really what's interesting. With the Sasquatch, we have no baseline. We have no baseline of behavior and no baseline of understanding other than from indigenous encounters. And I will have to have a caveat, a sidebar to some of this, which is some of the most interesting understandings of Bukwa, Sonokwa in the Pacific Northwest is that some of the earliest anthropologists, and the one that I have looked at the most is Franz Boas and his Tlingit a translator and Kwakiutl translator, George Hunt. They actually were very aware of the presence of these creatures within the cultures of the Kwakiutl people, and actually had recorded them as a part of ceremonies. And that really intensive, interesting field work among the Kwakiutl in the 1880s and 1890s, early 1900s, they were aware of this, and this was actually written down. The thing is that a lot of this knowledge was not really understood well until much later. And I'll be honest with you. When you look at Boas' understanding of, an example is the winter ceremony of the Kwakiutl. It's an ancestral ceremony. There's a very integral part of one secret society. The Kwakiutl have secret societies. One of them is the most famous, the Hamasa Society, which is the cannibal. It's really poorly translated as the Cannibal Society. But part of that is where shamans from their people chosen to be healers, go into the forest for long periods of time. And very little is known about the Hamasa, the tradition as it was originally known, not as we know it today. Our understanding of the Kwakiutl now is very much what is presented is only partly known of their traditions, because a lot of it is hidden in their culture.
Right, they're not going to talk about it.
Right. But what's intriguing is the shamanic ritual system of the Hamasa people, of the Hamasa societies. When the shaman goes into the woods to learn, and as it is translated, is to learn from the spirit of Bukwa, how to live and learn healing traditions and how to live in the forest to become wild. And then part of the winter ceremony is bringing the Hamasa and taming them back into society. So part of the winter ceremony, both the Bukwas and Sonokwa are figured prominently in the ceremony. So basically what's intriguing is that there is an understanding that individuals in that society will go into the woods, into the wilderness, to learn from what is translated loosely as the spirit of Bukwa, where that spirit enters them and then they become wild and learn from. And interestingly enough, when you look at some of the dance rituals from this tradition, the earlier Hamasa dancers, their dances were a little different than what you see today when you look at the Hamasa ceremonies as a part of the winter ceremony. And it's an indication that this ceremony still has prominence in the traditions, but that, when you start doing the research and you start looking, you begin to realize that were they truly being imbued with the spirit of the woods, the spirit of the wild, the wilderness of Bukwas, or were they actually learning from these creatures, and had this relationship? And see, it's just really intriguing to look at this. But there's so much we don't know because these traditions, of course, are still hidden, and it takes a lot of ethnohistorical research of these traditions back in the 1880s and 1890s to really have an understanding of their meaning, both today in today's Kwakiutl people, as to what they were originally ceremonially used for, including both the costumes and everything, as well, that are very much indicative of the wild men and wild women of the woods. Interestingly, another quick sidebar, I could sit here and talk about this for hours, but another interesting sidebar around this tradition is that when the Kwakiutl were interviewed about, what is Bukwas, what is Sinopwa, they, of all the pantheons of spirits that exist in the Kwakiutl universe and their worldview and their cosmology, as we call it, the two they say that still manifest in the real world are Sinopwa and Bukwas. So of all of the spiritual forms, let's just say that they recognize within their belief system, the two that they say literally are still in physical form are Sinopwa and Bukwas.
Yeah, Winona talk about that too, and they don't want to talk about it either. The people she's tried to contact, they don't want to talk about it either.
Yeah.
And anything we get nowadays is pretty much going to be watered down. Anything they explain to us is going to be watered down. They're not going to tell us the deep part.
Yeah.
And then you transpose that to the rest of the tribes across the country, across America itself. These creatures have always been there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's the Pacific and the Salish language alone. There are well over a half dozen words for these creatures. When you get into Washington State and other parts of the United States, you begin to see the large variety that they are recognized. And when you actually interview people from these areas and these tribes, they will tell you that no, Bigfoot, or what we call Bigfoot, is been a part of their reality for thousands of years. It's been a part of their cultural complex for hundreds and hundreds of years, generations upon generations. And so yeah, I mean that alone. I've often said the ethnographic argument for Bigfoot is overwhelming when you start looking at this.
Well, that seems like a good stopping place. Keep your steam going there, Kenny, and we'll be back after intermission. Everyone,
okay.
We're going to go to break now. Lauren, go ahead and take it away.
All right, here we go.
Hello, and welcome back to Nite Callers Radio. Tonight we are interviewing Kenny Jolhoske out of Maryland, and it's been a very informative show so far. I've learned so much, and I want to say I feel completely like everything is going straight over my head. I'm learning a lot, but I have nothing to compare it to, I will be honest. I've always been just a straight-in-the-woods, clueless researcher. And this is just very, very interesting, Kenny.
All you have to acknowledge is disturbing.
Well, you were mentioning at the very beginning of the program that there were some things that you wanted to get to later in the program, and here we are later in the program. Would you like to go ahead and address those issues now?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to sort of, like I said, one of my real interests in this area of research, and it has becoming more so the more I'm engaged in the field and out there. I solo when I Bigfoot do work. I've only gone out with somebody once or twice. For my first time out, I went out many times with a friend into this area. But the last 6 months in particular, I've been intensively soloing on my own in the woods to try and gain the trust of this group, that the small number of individuals that I think are around me. That when I go in, this area is remote, and this one area that I go into, as soon as I have to go up I hike in, and then I have to go up a ridge line, which is about an 80-degree angle up basically a steep hillside to get into my area. And I've noticed a communication pattern with both wood knocking and rock clacking once I enter the area, and then it would clack back. And this goes on for some time. And so one of my areas of interest around here is how this communication is happening, and how they're using this communication, the wood knocking and the rock clacking. This one area that I went into about a month ago is down a steep ravine, and I began to realize that there were issues of territory with them. So, for instance, I make it a pattern that I come into the area the same way, and I leave the same way, so that I don't surprise them. Not like I really could surprise them, but so that my routine is sort of ritual for them, so that they don't feel like I'm trying to sneak up on them or do something that they may not like. But a few times I've actually gone up the river end along the river where the ridge line faces the river. They're like cliff overhangs. And I noticed that the one time I did that, and then I walked up the ravine, quite a climb, I got growled at, and actually had one of these creatures, and believe me, this to this day kind of freaks me out, is I had gotten a little too close, and the ravine overfaces a rock overhang of a cliff, and at the top of the cliff, I heard what sounded like a very large individual shaking trees violently. So I began to back up the ravine, literally backstepping away from the ravine as if I had gone too far. And less than 20 yards behind me, I was growled at by one of these creatures. And I mean, it was the most guttural growl. And my only way out of the ravine was to go towards the growl. So, and I'm out there by myself.
Lovely.
So
was this
basically,
daytime?
This
Kenny,
was daytime.
Was this during the day? Okay.
Yeah, it was during the day, but the foliage and tree cover is so thick that if it's an overcast day, I mean, it's literally like dusk. I mean, it's it's not like you're getting a lot of sunlight through the trees. It's actually quite thick, and so in order to back out of the ravine, I actually had to go towards the growl. And then once I got out of the ravine, I actually growled back, and it growled back at me. And this went on for about 5 or 6 times, and finally I could hear it walking down the ravine from the area. I actually could hear the bipedal footfalls going. So I now have, over trial and error, learned that when I enter this area, that there are certain areas that just off limits to them. So trying to build trust with this very small group of individuals is, this is where, people are bringing in trail cams and bringing in, infrared devices. I don't know if they have the ability to understand what these are, but when I go out there, a lot of times I have my backpack and my walking stick and my wits and nerves, when I go into these areas. And this is why I say to people, until you've actually had the field experience, until you've been in the woods with these creatures, you really just, it's a whole different world. It's just really a whole different world.
All these new people that are getting involved can intellectualize it all they want, but once you actually get the physical experience of it, it changes your instincts. It actually wakes things up in you that you didn't feel before.
Yeah. And I've also this in one area where I do research, and in the area where I have had the most experiences, encounters with this group. One day I had gone a little farther south down the ridge than I normally do and crossed over into another wooded area. And I can't verify this 100%, but I know they watch me, of course, when I'm in the forest. But I walked into this one area, and I think I caught and they disturbed one of them. And basically, and I heard this loud snapping or crashing behind me. I mean, to my left, and I could hear them. I could hear this huge foot falling running down the ravine. And then I went into this area and found a totally new structure, and it was humongous. I have pictures of these, and I can. Maybe another show I can share them, but
yes.
I have found some extraordinary tree structures that literally these just weren't made by people. This is just
how would you describe them, since we don't have the pictures? Would you be able to describe?
Some of these are trees that are they're, I wouldn't call them saplings, but they're half-grown trees. And what's interesting, when these trees are bent over, they're bent over in such a way that the trees are not killed. So there are still leaves. They're not destroying the trees, but they're bending these 3-4 inch thick trees over, completely over, and then they're held down by another larger tree. And then oftentimes other sticks are placed around them. In my area, I find an upside down a Y formation with some of these structures where they've actually taken trees that have forked branches and bent them down and held them down, and this what looks to me like an upside down Y. It seems to be common with this group here that I've been following. But they also do leave other structural forms that are really intriguing, and this is just in an area where the strength of these creatures, I mean, a human could not do this. I mean, and then I have actually found trees where there have been pressure breaks, where the difference between twist breaks and breaks done by wind damage. When a Sasquatch or one of these creatures makes a structure, there's often what's called a twist break, where the tree isn't just bent over, but there's a twist in how it's bent. So we know that this isn't done by wind damage. And it's made into a larger structure or tied into other trees. And I know this is found all over the continental United States and Canada. I'm sure many researchers listening to this right now can identify with these structures, but I find new ones in areas where if I go into an area where I don't frequent and then go back, they'll actually have made a structure not far from where I was standing. So they're obviously following my activity through the forest.
Well, Kenny, do you engage in gifting? Have you ever done that?
I have.
Food?
And I have something here to share with you about that.
Okay.
Being curious about this whole process of gifting, I wouldn't quite say I'm gifting because although I am leaving food, what totally took me by surprise was the conditions into which the receptacle I was gifting food in would come back to me. So in other words, I was very curious about the whole thing with peanut butter. We all know about the peanut butter thing, leaving jars of peanut butter. So I said, okay, there's a sale on Jiffy at Giant. I'm going to buy 2 jars. I'm going to keep one for myself and take one out to the woods. And I'd never done this before, so I left. I found an area where they were highly active in, and I sort of kind of just picked a tree and left it there. And then, it was way off in the woods, and so I just kind of left it there. And then I came back.
With the lid on or the lid off?
The lid on. The lid on.
Okay.
So I leave it there, and I said, okay, I'll come back in a day or so and check. And, of course, it's gone. So I'm like, okay, well, who knows, maybe a person took it. I mean, I'm just, in my mind, rationalizing that. And then I come back 2 days later, and I find the jar, and the condition of the jar shocked me. What I found was this. They had left bite patterns in the Jiffy lid jar, in the jar itself, that matched the canines and M3 molars of a large mouse. These were not nibbled on by rodents. These were actual bite impressions, dental impressions into the jar lid. I have 4 examples of this now. And I can actually now look at these jar lids and tell you that the bite impressions were more than likely done by the same individual, and that I can actually measure the width and distance between the M3 molars and the back and the front canine. And these were not done by bears. These were not done by people. This was done by a large form, because the bite strength and pressure to leave a dental impression into a Jiffy jar plastic lid is a bite pressure that we as humans don't have.
What about the peanut butter? Was it gone, or was it still
gone?
In the jar?
And the jars always come back in the same condition, which is they look as almost as if they had been washed clean. The label is removed, and the center piece of the jar has been taken out. So either something very large has taken its hands and ripped out the center of the peanut butter, or they've done it with their mouth. And the missing gaping center of the jar is always in the same condition. The jar looks like, when it's brought back, that it has been run through a dishwasher. It is so clean. There's no traces of peanut butter, and it always comes back in the same condition. Sometimes we
Did you ever find any sort of fingerprints or any kind of hand?
Yes, I have, and I've got these in. I have these in plastic bags, and I've saved them. Now, whether DNA could be gotten from them or not, that's the whole other thing with the DNA issue, because there's so much when you find DNA, when you find any kind of hair, anything that looks like it's been chewed on, bit on, what have you, there's always environmental contaminants that can get into these samples. So when they're DNA'd, sampled, and they come back inconclusive or of another animal, more than likely what you're dealing with is contamination. So, yes, I have found these issues with where I found them where it's like, geez, if I could get this to a DNA lab. But then again, if I did that, is the sample already contaminated?
Right, maybe a bear got a hold of it afterwards, or a coon or something else just was playing with it, whatever, licking on it. It's going to contaminate it anyway.
Yeah, but to me, what's more important than possibly getting DNA sampling off of the jar itself is the condition of the lid. I have dental mold, essentially. I actually have the Jiffy jar lid itself. To me, is evidence by looking at the bite radius on the jar lid that this was not done by raccoons or done by a bear. We don't really even have bear in this area. Maryland has a very interesting history with bear, but the part of Maryland I do research in, we don't have an active bear population anymore. So there is room for a large omnivore to take that ecological niche. So we don't have bear really in this area, and a bear would have left a very different bite mark and impression. And I don't even think a bear would have done to the lid what I have found. So I have 3 examples of this now, and it's really interesting.
Do you feel like you have more activity when you're by yourself than when you go with someone else?
Exactly.
I agree. I have the same thing, but Can you explain why you think this is so?
I think because as an individual, they see me on a regular basis when I'm out there. I'm not threatening to them. I show curiosity in what they do. I make active attempts to communicate with them through wood knocking or rock clacking. So they know I'm trying to communicate with them, and I'm not of their species. So here I am trying to make communication with them, and, it's a unique situation. And, they see that. They're curious about it. I'm sure they see other humans. They have experience with seeing other humans, but most other humans don't even know they're there. And so, therefore, here I am trying to communicate. I've left food for them. I've made, active attempts to try and encounter them. I've put myself out there on a number of occasions to see if I can get them to come closer to me. They have done somewhat of that, but they always keep a very large distance from me. When I brought other people out there, they still do interact. They will rock clack, but not in the same way and as close as they do when it's just me. So I agree. I think that, and that also at the same time is kind of terrifying because you realize if you really want an experience of even closer encounters with them, that you have to put yourself possibly in a situation that could be dangerous, which is, going out there at night by yourself, which I don't recommend, and I've been warned about this myself. And, even though I know if I were to do that, I probably would have a very close encounter. Because I'll tell you what, I've been out there, I've gone out there different times of the day just to sort of experiment. And I was out there about a week ago around, let's say, 6 o'clock in the evening, just as the light was starting to fade. And I went out there just for a brief, just to sort of check things out. I really wasn't doing any intensive, like researching out there. And they got very close. I could hear them coming up the hill, close to it, and I'm like, okay, nighttime is their time. So I sort of backed away and sort of went back down the trail and back to my car and drove away. But it was like I got that experience of, they get real brazen when the lights go out. I mean, it's a whole different game. It's a whole different game.
You are exactly right. I have found that myself. Even though
I don't think you need to go there at night.
Yeah, I've had daytime sightings. In fact, most of my sightings have been during the daytime. And people think, well, they don't even wake up until dusk. Well, that might be so in some cases, but I think that at all times there's one awake out there watching and listening. And,
I agree, because I know that they use what I guess people have called them sentinels, but,
sentinels.
Where there's one that, because as soon as I enter into the area, boom, I get that first rock clack, or usually it's a rock clacking. It's not a wood knock with this group that because I guess maybe I'm so close to a river, I don't know, but I get a lot of rock clacking. I do get wood knocking. And I know this one individual in this group, I enter into the area a certain way, and I come to a certain tree stump, and I will, wood knock with my walking stick. And it will rock clack exactly almost 30 degrees to where I leave the peanut butter every time. It's like I go boom, boom, and it'll start rock clacking. And then I'll go boop, boop, it'll rock clack, and then I won't hear from them the rest of the time I'm out there. But, and then sometimes if I get down far enough to sort of, I call it the no-fly zone, he'll make his presence more known. It's interesting.
I think you're building up enough of a trust that I don't think you need to go out there at night. It might be too dangerous for you out there by yourself. I think you build up enough trust that if you just put yourself vulnerable enough to that point, that they will show themselves to you as a kind of like a hi and then disappear. They're as curious about you as you are about them. So they're going to, one of them is going to get to that point. I mean, maybe the other ones won't. There might be a grumpy one out there someplace going to hide off in the distance and not bother with you. But this one is going to be checking you out every time you go up there just out of curiosity. Sooner or later, that one is going to at least peek around a tree and stare at you for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I had.
Have you ever carried a weapon up there? That was a question from the chat. They want to know if you're armed when you go into these areas.
Absolutely not. And the reason is because Maryland has the most strict gun laws in the United States. You cannot carry a firearm at all in Maryland. Maryland has let's put it this way. You can carry a firearm. You can have a license to carry, but you cannot carry it with you into a national forest system. And the only time you can carry a loaded gun or rifle into a forest in Maryland is during hunting season, and then of course that has to be licensed. But like as far as like, I have researcher friends in Texas, in Arkansas, and other parts of the United States where people can legally carry a gun loaded. Maryland even has transport laws around guns that are, for instance, you can carry a licensed gun in a car, but it must be unloaded at the time of transport. You can't. So this is one of the things about Maryland. So no, if you're squatching in Maryland, let me tell you something. It's a walking stick or a knife. If you're going to carry anything. Yeah, I mean.
Okay. I think that in a way that's an advantage, especially if you're trying to get closer to them and have some sort of interaction. To not have a weapon. Have you ever been at a point in time out there where you wished you had a weapon just to feel a little safer? Okay. I can imagine.
I'll tell you, but that's my own inhibitions here because I'll tell you this. I was out about 2 months ago, and I was pretty deep in, a little deeper in than I wanted to be, but it was a really nice day. I started out early. My area is quite extensive to hike into. And so you can kind of, I'm a big nature lover. I love to be out in nature anyway. And so I'm hiking, and I'm enjoying myself. And I realize I'm getting a little further in than I normally would be comfortable with by myself. And I started hearing footfalls behind me. And these were distinctive, heavy footfalls. And I'm like, okay, it's probably what I depicted was the juvenile following me. Or possibly that would be their sentinel. I don't know. But so and I could hear it getting kind of close. And I stopped by the river to take a break. And I got growled at in a way that wasn't like, hi, here I am. It's sort of like, I felt it to be a little threatening. So what I do is I kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but I turned on my heels and I looked in its direction, and I didn't growl back, but I started talking to it. And I began to, kind of get aggressive in my voice. And I have a big walking stick. It's made from driftwood, so it's like a tree branch. So I stomped my walking stick twice into the ground really aggressively and just stared in its direction and kept walking. And it backed off after that moment.
That's interesting why you would do that. What gave you the idea to demonstrate? That's almost a primate behavior there of ground something.
I really can't explain it other than I have been close enough to these creatures where if they wanted to hurt me, they could have. Right. But I felt at that moment I had to stand my ground because I do know people that have given into their fear when they've been around these creatures, and they will use that to their advantage. I have not only talked to enough researchers who have been in this situation, but, you kind of have to at times say, hey, look, wait a minute. You're not going to sneak up on me and try and hurt me. If you are, you're going to have a fight on your hands. And you kind of have to, it's sort of like the bear approach. When there's a bear around you, they tell you to not, you have to kind of make noise and make yourself bigger and, I kind of took that approach to the Bigfoot this time. Because I was in several miles in an area that I wasn't quite familiar with in this particular forested area, and I knew that this individual was trailing me, and I'm normally okay with that in an area that I'm very familiar with in the woods, but I was in an area that I wasn't real familiar with, and I learned my lesson. I learned to do that more infrequently than not. But I was kind of trying to explore the area more, and I'm glad I did. I found some new structure and figured out where another water source they could be using was coming from. I kind of answered some of my own questions doing that, but I kind of stand my ground. I was,
Yeah. That's fascinating. Just the growling. That would have, every time I've ever been growled at, which is not very many times, actually. It's only been a couple of times that I felt that they were growling at me.
Yeah.
I retreated. I didn't stand my ground. One time I did stand my ground. Sort of. I was in a campground and being growled at, and I had a tent set up and everything. I could have left, but I did not. The very first time that I was growled at, I retreated, especially when I felt like I was more in their environment.
Sure.
I was not in a designated human campground then, and I felt that I had gotten too close. Was where I shouldn't be, and the wrong time. It was at night, and but you were going to talk about. We're getting down to 10 minutes left,
okay.
And I know I didn't give the phone number out. If anyone does want to call and ask Kenny a question, the number is 347-989-0313. That number is 347-989-0313. Okay, Kenny, we're down to 9 minutes, 37 seconds. So can you touch on what you were wanting to touch on?
The big thing was, one of the things that when the very few radio interviews I've ever given, I'd really like to reach out to researchers who are in the field regularly, hunters, woodsmen, even the scientists that go out, is that, the footprint and the foot morphology is very important. But I really think we need to start moving beyond this into larger questions of socially, cultural ecology and issues where they're understanding their behavior. What is it about their behavior that makes them unique and different? And answering these larger questions about Sasquatch, as far as like I keep using the word social organization, but trying to understand how they live in the forest and how they communicate with one another. And only people that are in the field on a regular basis have this knowledge. And I have said for years I would love to see a collective database done on the behavioral ecology of the Sasquatch, and not just eyewitness accounts, but let's look at behavior structures and things across the United States in a database that could be accessed to where researchers could then say, oh, I'm seeing this also in my area, and start having this dialogue that I don't think is really happening in the community.
No.
And I really think that this sort of thing needs to happen, and of course more funding if possible to do this kind of research. I mean, it's just there needs to be much more of a cultural approach to these creatures, and I can't emphasize that more.
Okay, Billy Grass, do you have any questions?
Really?
That's wonderful. By the way, Kenny, that was wonderful. Well said. And
Thank you.
I would really like to see that happen. Yes, very well said.
I would hate to get Kenny sidetracked. He's doing a phenomenal job. He's been an awesome guest.
He is he? I mean, he really is. I'm just totally captivated by him.
One of the issues I have is that Bigfoot is running out of room over east of the Rockies. They're running out of room with all the populations buying up all the land and flattening most of the forest, farmlands, and things like that.
Right.
Developments are just spreading out all over the place. And granted, there's going to be a lot of new researchers and stuff out there, but these Bigfoot that are out there now are under a lot of pressure.
Yes.
So their cultural systems might be changing on a daily basis in the first place.
Yeah.
Getting to know one group, like in your case, is probably the best thing to do. Comparing them to others is good. because there might be comparisons between Ohio and Illinois and other places along the Mississippi and Ohio Delta, places like that. But there are going to be some differences in certain places depending on what they have to experience. There are some better places just west of the Mississippi, going up into Minnesota and other places like that around the Great Lakes. But I like your idea of trying to be able to communicate with other people, but unfortunately a lot of them are in the same boat. They don't want to give their places away. They don't want to give their research. There's a lot of jealousy within the system. They don't want to give their research away. There are certain aspects having to do with the communication, their stick structures, their language they're using with the sticks, trying to figure how they're like building up borderlines. They're communicating with other, let's say, tribes that they have to communicate with. They still have a genetic diversity that they have to keep up in order to survive, and so they have to communicate with other tribes elsewhere. So there's lots of aspects.
I completely agree with that, and I understand that. I just think that there might be a way in which, I know the University of Washington State in British Columbia back in 1977 did a major symposium on Bigfoot and Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest. It's a very famous symposium, and I know they've done them since then. And, the conferences are great. I absolutely love the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. I go every year. I learn so much. I just love it. But I also think that we need to start looking at maybe doing symposiums at universities that are very interested in this, to where we can actually gather not just researchers but other specialists in the field of behavioral ecology, primate ecology, paleoanthropology,
anthropology.
and paleoanthropology and cultural anthropology, to start looking at this really rich tapestry of experiences that are going on in the field with researchers, and get a bigger picture, because I think we're sort of lacking that. There's a lot of political infighting with Bigfoot groups I've seen, and getting a much better perspective on this, because there's so much more to Sasquatch than some of these things that I'm seeing in the field, where, for instance, there seems to be territorial rivalries even among Bigfoot groups and sharing information and all this. But there needs to be a larger coalescing of this data and this information to get a better understanding of what, not just what is a Sasquatch, but again, how are they living in the world? How are they adapting, and how are they using the landscape of the forest to communicate with one another, and to ultimately have encounters with humans, or humans having encounters with them? And what does all this mean? I mean, there's just all these large questions, these big picture questions that would be answered in any other field of science. This is what kills me scientifically, is what would be done in any other field of ecology and any other field of science. We're not doing in Bigfoot research. We need to be doing them. We need to be doing these larger questions, these bigger questions.
You're absolutely right, Kenny.
Bigfoot not being accepted is one of the problems.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big roadblock.
I'm sorry, Lori.
Because it's going to take. Well, I was just saying you've been a fascinating guest, but I have to agree. It's going to take discovery. I don't know why it has to be discovery first, and then the rest comes later. It seems like to me researchers should go on. They've already discovered there is a species out there, an unknown species. And they've already discovered that. And I agree with Kenny that they need to be going in these different areas and go ahead and get a head start. Yeah. Basically.
There are a lot of researchers out there who know so much about Bigfoot on a cultural basis who aren't talking just because of this situation.
Well, there's a lot of ideologue camps in Bigfoot, and I've I'm not going to sit here and go back and forth around that, but there are definitely, we all know, competing theories, and the theories have their camps. But in fact, how much of that is actually based in field work and not just anthropological? I mean, I could sit here and talk for an hour about Gigantopithecus and the different concepts historically around Gigantopithecus within the physical anthropological community in the major papers that have been written on it, and we can sit and discuss about that in and of itself, that could be a whole other show. But the larger question is looking at Sasquatch and Bigfoot from the field experience and from the perspective of what can we gather from the larger pictures of the data that's being discovered and found, and also, what does all this mean? What can we assess from all this? There's a lot of interesting questions to be answered in this field, and I think until we move beyond the ideologues, move beyond the personal politicking and the infighting in the Bigfoot group, is any real serious research going to be done in this field?
Speaking of moving on,
correct.
Yeah.
Well, we have reached the end of the show. We're down to 31 seconds. Kenny, I want to thank you very much for coming on. You were a most excellent guest. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we'll have you back. I promise you that. You will be back. If you'll have us, if we can get the Starship Enterprise running, you're welcome to beam aboard and go.
Fantastic.
Want to let everyone know that you should join us next week. We're having Bigfoot hunting out southeast Oklahoma. His name is Christopher Milton. And we'd like everyone to join us next week. And we thank you all for joining the show tonight. And we're going to call it a show. Who's going to get that outro tonight?
Knew that was coming. I knew it.
We haven't heard a single word out of you tonight, Billy. That's all right. That's all right. I tell you what, you guys are doing a great job. I just want to say, great job, everyone.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll go ahead and call it a night. Great show, everybody, and we'll see you all out there next week. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Hey, everyone.
Night.
Night.